Brought to you by the EveryDollar app. Start budgeting for free today.
Hi, I'm looking for wonderful advice as a way that I can help out my husband. He worked in pharmaceutical chemistry with a bachelor's and a PhD, worked for 15 years, got laid off in 2011, and he's never gotten a job since. It's been really challenging. When he was laid off.
Wow, that is quite a tough scenario. Sounds like a very educated individual who maybe landed on hard times. I think they said 2011. So this might have been shortly around the 2008-2009 recession. And that's quite unfortunate that they haven't been able to find work for some time here. So I'm sure they're going to get into details shortly, but some of the key things that could be impacting this individual is their retirement savings. If you add potentially a career ahead of those 13, 15 years of being unemployed, then also there's how has this individual been sustaining themselves? Like they could have even been drawing down on their retirement or savings that they had. So this is definitely an unfortunate circumstance for a number of folks who could be in a situation like this. So I'm sure they'll get into more details now.
Yeah, big time. His layoff coincided with Obamacare being launched and a push to get all sorts of pharmaceuticals down to generic price. So it made research really hard to be profitable in the U.S. And, of course, the financial crisis had started in 2008. So there were thousands of chemists of his caliber looking for jobs. He looked all over the United States. We were willing to move. We had followed his career previously. And I had been a stay-at-home parent. But when he was 2 years out of having a job, I went back in and I got a full-time job and rebuilt my career, which has been really helpful, but it hasn't replaced his earnings because my bachelor's degree earnings do not equal PhD earnings in chemistry.
Apparently they do.
Yeah, they do. They far exceed it.
Well, I guess in that case, yep, you're right.
Yeah, that's a great point that they made, which is this individual got a different type of job in order to help pay for it. And they might have been a little bit hard on themselves. Maybe they're comparing their income to their husband's income when the market was good for them. And I think this is something that happens to a lot of folks. I know I've seen a number of individuals who have been laid off, especially more recently, in the post-COVID layoff, especially in the tech area. And this is a tough decision that I think many folks have to face, which is, especially if you're coming out of like a career high of maybe you have the most income you've ever made, maybe the most prestigious role that you've ever had, and you lose that role, it can be really hard to settle for something that's not as good as that role. And so this seems to be a scenario where maybe their husband couldn't make that transition themselves and accept kind of a lower prestige or income position. And so this individual is the one who actually took on that responsibility for their family. And so that's quite admirable. But I do agree with what they highlighted, which I think was in some ways encouraging the individual, which is you don't need to look down on yourself for how much you make compared to somebody who can't even be employed right now. That seems to be a very unrealistic expectation to put on yourself, especially when that individual can't themselves find work of comparable income again afterwards. So this is a hard place to be in for anybody. But it is something that I hope folks don't have to encounter, but is unfortunately likely for many of us as we progress through our careers.
What I want to do is figure out how I can help him out. I've helped him to seek counseling when he was really down and having depression after being laid off. Helped him seek medical help. We've even moved halfway across the country from the East Coast back to the Midwest so we can be closer to family and have a lower cost of living. But I don't think that he is actively seeking different ways to look for jobs. We have enlisted a resume service way back 10 years ago, and he signed up for some online job seminars, and that was right at the beginning of 2020.
Hey, Susan.
It was all about networking.
Susan, I just want to interrupt you. This has nothing to do with the mechanics of finding a job.
Okay.
He doesn't want to work.
It's really hard. I do accept that concept.
I know. But
I hear from him that he does, but I don't see him taking the steps.
But behavior is a language. Behavior is a language. What's he
Yeah.
been telling you for a decade?
Well, and even
His
went back to
behavior
school
for a
and got a
decade is,
master's.
I don't work.
I don't work.
That's the answer to John's
Yeah.
question.
And his behavior for a decade is, I know that you're scared, and I know you're exhausted, I know you're freaked out about bills. You go do something about it. I'm not going to.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. I would generally agree with what they're highlighting here, which is if you're not working for 10, 12, 13 years, you have become accustomed to this situation that you're in, and to some extenses, maybe this like trained helplessness that might be occurring because again, that I'm sure was a huge hit to their ego and to the work that they were doing. And I've unfortunately seen you can find individuals who are in this case who effectively give up because they don't want to lower themselves or their image of themselves into working for a lower type of job. And again, this is where it's Susan's husband in this case, and so this is a married couple, and that's a tough situation. I think being married, you have to be able to do the best you can for the benefit of the whole. And so that's what Susan did here. She stepped up. She was a stay-at-home mom. She had been out of the work, presumably, for a number of years due to that, and found a job and is supporting them. Whereas the husband basically gave up at this point. And so I think this is a scenario where you have to get your priorities aligned. And for this individual, they might still be struggling with this image or perception. Maybe even some of their peers that they went to college with or they worked with maybe didn't get laid off, or maybe got laid off and then found even more success in their career afterwards. And so it's really hard comparing yourself to others. And Susan has stated that she's helped get her husband like resume coaching and job finding coaching. If anything, I would probably assume that maybe this is like therapy or something else. Like maybe they should be speaking to someone about the struggles that they're dealing with as an individual. To me, it sounds like maybe they are struggling with their identity at this point in time, and they're also not accepting reality of the situation and working towards it. And I agree with what they're saying, which is if they're not working for 10 years, they're not trying to be working at that time. I've seen a number of folks struggle. I know I have struggled myself trying to get work or to pay the bills at some point, and you do what you have to do. You sometimes earn less than what you think you deserve. You put in the extra hours, you work the hours nobody else wants, you do the jobs nobody else wants to do, and you make it work out. And you keep doing this until you can get your foundation underneath you again and your feet underneath you again, and then you start to build up from there. But it sounds like this individual isn't willing to take a step back from this perceived high in their life or their career. And this individual likely needs to work through those issues themselves as well as just getting out there. And Susan likely should be pushing this individual. I also see being in a relationship or in a marriage isn't necessarily just enabling the other individual to do what they want or when they want to do those things. I think you should be pushing on each other in order to keep progressing as individuals and become as good as you possibly can be. And so hopefully they'll give her some of this advice.
And here's why I don't have a lot of compassion. I know too many people of my personal friends who have PhDs who got laid off, and they are at the grocery store or they're at Walmart throwing boxes in the interim because they have families and they have commitments that they've made. They have responsibilities.
Absolutely.
I also have friends who've been in the throes of depression and have worked like you wouldn't believe to work themselves out. And 6 months, 1 year later, they're doing something.
And I've encouraged him to take any kind of an entry-level basic job just to get back into working.
That's right.
And he's not been actively doing that. I did. That's how I got into my job. And now I've got
Well, Susan, that's what normal people do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're broke and you don't have work and you can't find work in your field, you take a job.
Right.
And then you keep trying to work your way back into your field, maybe, but you take a job. And there's no excuses or reason that goes for 13 years unless he's mentally disabled or physically disabled. And even then, I think he could probably have been doing something.
I agree.
So I'm
not sure what I can do.
I don't know that you can do anything.
Can't.
You've done a lot already. The only thing I would, so my friend Henry Cloud tells a story about a guy who tried to help his son get through college, and he kept getting thrown out because he was smoking weed or whatever. And the guy get him back into another college, he'd get thrown out, get him back into another college and get thrown out. And the guy said to Henry, he goes, I got to tell you about my son's problems. And he goes, your son doesn't have any problems. His dad takes care of everything, and he smokes weed. Your son doesn't have any trouble. He goes, you're the one's got problems. You have a son that's misbehaving, and my job is to help you help your son have some problems. Because your son's being taken care of by his trust fund daddy. And in a sense, Susan, I know you're a kind, sweet person. I can hear it in your voice and the way you've described this. I want somehow someone in your husband's life to help him have some problems that gets him off his butt.
Yeah, we have kind of a blessing and kind of a curse.
Yeah, so I think this is that's an interesting story Dave shared, but I think it is a great point, which is likely what's happened for her husband is that he's become comfortable with the situation that he's in. And so even the example that I gave earlier, which is like, if you need to make ends meet, like you do what you need to do to get that done. And Susan is the one who seems to have felt that urgency and stepped up in order to take on that scenario. And so the husband didn't have to struggle with those things. Like they likely are having food on the table. They're likely able to pay their mortgage. They said they moved to a cheaper area. They're around family. So there's a good chance that either between just on her current salary or with the salary of herself and maybe some support from their family members are able to get by at this point in time. And I agree. I think this is to some extent what I was trying to highlight earlier, which is sometimes you have to push the other individual. And I agree with some of the sentiment that they're highlighting, which is maybe the husband should struggle a little bit. Now, I don't mean kick him out of the house or something like that, so that he ends up being homeless or something, but this is where comfort can come into a variety of ways. And so this is where, if you're on one salary, I really hope that Susan is able to also save for retirement at this point in time, because even just on one salary to get by, it's going to be tough. I'm not sure if she would have the ability to also save for retirement, not just for herself, but for herself and her husband. And so this is likely going to be hurting them in the future. And likely there's going to be many struggles for them in the future when that happens. Like what happens when Susan is unable to work? What if she has an injury? What if she gets laid off? They could be in some very serious trouble at that point. And so a simple way that she probably could start to work towards this is make sure she is investing in her 401k or IRA or any type of retirement vehicle that she has in order to help support them in the future. And then this will likely drop down what her income is day to day and what she can provide for the family. And so this is a scenario where if your spouse isn't working and you really want them to, what is the impetus for them to do it? Maybe they have air conditioning and heat, they have clean running water, they have internet, they have entertainment, they have clothing on their back. What else would this individual need to sustain themselves? And so this is where like maybe you need to pull back a little bit of, maybe you're not buying them new clothes all the time. Maybe they got to live with what they have for now and they have to work to get new things. Maybe your food budget gets a little bit reduced. Maybe you are having beans and rice or ramen or whatever is your personal preferred cheap meal instead of maybe having something more luxurious or going out to eat. Maybe you reduce the entertainment. If this individual is working, it's unclear how long she is working for, but maybe this is where you cancel your streaming services, your cable, maybe even you cancel your internet for some period of time if that is doable for her work. Maybe she could offset it with like a data plan for her phone or something like that. Something to basically make living a little bit less comfortable for her husband, but also can then be used towards good for the two of them, like savings for retirement or savings in general. And so once this individual is slightly less comfortable, they're likely going to want to seek comfort And they'll likely complain back to Susan or the individual who they're relying on to just give them the things they had before. But that's where you can say, no, I'm willing to give you pay for our home. We're married. We're together. I will give you the basic necessities, but nothing beyond the basics. You should be contributing as well. And then that could force them to do small jobs here and there. Maybe it's not getting a part-time job or a full-time job. Maybe they're doing gig work. Maybe they're doing like Uber or delivery, or maybe they're mowing someone's lawn once a week or something like that, just to get some spending money to get back into the habit of getting things for themselves. And this could just be the start of a snowball that they're starting to push that will then push them into saying, you know what, it's good that I'm able to buy these things for myself. Maybe I want something a little bit nicer. Maybe I want a little bit nicer clothing, or maybe there's something that I'm interested in that I want to purchase. And then maybe that'll push them to work a few more hours. And then this can help ease the transition back in. But again, if things are too comfortable for this individual, then what's the impetus? Clearly, over a 13-year span, they didn't have to work for anything. So pushing them or creating a scenario in which they have to work at least for some portion of what they have today might be enough to at least get the ball rolling.
For his parents, who have both passed away during this whole thing, they left him money and they were helping support us during the earlier parts of his unemployment. So he doesn't see a need to get something, or we're going to be on the street.
So here's the problem. Here's the problem. And I'll say what John's getting to say ahead of him, because I know what he's going to say. You're losing respect for your husband.
Yes.
And it's going to cost you your marriage.
It could.
And he needs to know that. He doesn't believe that, and he doesn't know that.
Because this isn't about resumes. This is not about
no, this is about getting up off your butt.
What mom left us or dad left us in the trust fund. It's about none of that. This is you having the courage to say, after 10 years, I do not respect the man that I share a bed with. And he has a right, I believe, to know that. And it's about contribution and purpose.
Fair. Yeah, and it's taking us down a road that I don't want to go down, honey, which is that we're not going to end up married. And so we're going to go see a marriage counselor, and you're going to go get a job doing something in the next 30 days, or you are contributing to the end of our marriage. That's what a marriage counselor is going to teach you to say. We're not telling you to say. I've taken 2
marriage counselors, and it has not been successful, but maybe we need another person.
Yeah, you need somebody to get up in his grill.
I've even consulted a lawyer, and I found that I would have to pay him alimony.
Yep.
Despite putting him through 2 graduate degrees, because he went back during this, got another graduate degree at very little cost because I happened to work where he got the degree.
Yeah.
I hate this for you.
So that's a tough situation. So it sounds like this individual, Susan, is actually already looking into divorce proceedings, but hasn't informed her husband about it yet, or even the fact that she is having trouble in the marriage. Though it seems unlikely that she wouldn't have said anything, since they've already gone to a couple of marriage counselors. But this is a very tough scenario where she seems to already understand the implications of getting a divorce. So it sounds like this couple is very close to this scenario. So that is unfortunate for them. I do think they gave pretty reasonable advice. Get some counseling, start pushing the individual, give them some type of struggle for them to be able to push forward.
I hate this for you. Shouldn't be this way.
It's not right. It's wrong. But it's not going to get better until someone moves him. He's stuck. And somebody's going to have to love him enough to knock him out of the ditch, because he ain't climbing out. Create your free every dollar budget today, the simplest way to budget for your life.
Well, thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, please hit like or subscribe. I will see you around.